Hi, welcome to Escape into a Cause, the podcast inspiring Central Texans to turn good intentions into impact. I'm Stephanie Dyer, a philanthropic rookie, learning how to give back with a little help from my expert friends. Together, we'll share stories of local nonprofits, explore ways to connect, and encourage everyone to step up, unplug, and make a difference. Let's dive in and escape into a cause. Hey, Courtney.
Hi, Steph.
Later in the episode, we're going to escape into E3 Alliance, a nonprofit that uses data to drive systemic change in education across Central Texas. They're transforming the way schools and communities work together so that every student from every background has a chance to succeed.
Love that. Very cool.
You know I love data.
I know you do.
I do. I thought a good topic that matters was a book that I've been reading called Factfulness by Hans Rosling with his son and daughter-in-law, Ola and Anna Rosling. They are from Sweden. I'm not going to actually tell you exactly what it's about because then that will lead you to answer. There was a survey done in 2017 that they conducted with 12,000 people across 14 countries. 12 questions.
Okay.
15% of the people scored 0. Only one person, and they were in Sweden, out of 12,000 people got 11 out of 12 right.
Nobody scored 100%.
Correct.
All right.
Each question has 3 responses, and I'm going to ask you, I think, 4.
Okay.
You ready?
This is stressful.
Just fun fact, I did this with both of my sons and my husband, and we didn't score too hot, let me tell you. Brett scored 5 out of 12.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. Jaden 2. Connor scored 4, and I scored 6. I got 1 up on them.
Well done, you.
In the last 20 years, the proportion of the world's population living in extreme poverty has doubled, remained more or less the same, or been cut in half.
Doubled.
Cut in half.
Dang, really?
Yes.
Total opposite.
Yes.
Wow.
Less than 7% of people get this right. Only 5% in the U.S. The majority of people say doubled. Extreme poverty in the world has been cut by half in the last 20 years. Okay.
Amazing. Okay.
You ready for the next one?
All right. Well, now I'm going to have to switch my brain.
How did the number of deaths per year from natural disasters change over the last 100 years? Did they more than double, remain the same, or decrease to less than half? I think climate change. And yet predictability of those events has gotten better over the past 100 years. So you're at least able to give some type of warning or notice. Flat. Decreased to less than half. Significantly less people are dying from natural disasters. Okay. My thoughts in my head, I don't know if this is you, but I'm thinking global warming versus technology and infrastructure. The technology and infrastructure is going to allow more people to live.
Agreed.
How many of the world's 1-year-old children are vaccinated against some disease? 20%, 50%, 80%. How many 1-year-old children? That is correct, 80%. Only 17% in the U.S. got that one right. 80% of 1-year-olds in the world are vaccinated.
That's amazing.
That's incredible.
I know, isn't that incredible?
And a lot of that does have to do with the Melinda and Bill Gates Foundation.
Absolutely, 100%.
A few more questions. I can't help myself.
I love it.
Worldwide, 30-year-old men have spent 10 years in school on average. How many years has a 30-year-old woman spent in school? 9 years, 6 years, 3 years in the world. I think like countries like Afghanistan, and
they don't
Somalia, and South Sudan.
Stop women's educations at a certain age. 9.
I
know.
Wow. We know that in the U.S. they're passing
of course.
men,
and but
that's
average.
Very recent. And this was a poll taken in 2017. And we're just now seeing the numbers rise of women having more undergraduate degrees than men. But this is worldwide. In 1996, tigers, giant pandas, black rhinos, they were all listed as endangered. How many of these 3 species are more critically endangered today? 2 of them, 1 of them, or none of them?
None of them.
None of them, that's correct.
Yeah.
How many people in the world have some access to electricity? 20%, 50%, or 80%?
80%.
80%'s right. I know you're clearly seeing a trend.
I'm totally seeing a trend. But I also actually knew about that.
Did you?
Yes.
That's amazing.
Now, that number is much smaller when it comes to the internet, which is really interesting.
The digital divide is a little bit different.
Yep.
Agreed. Hans Rosling has said that Nobel winners, medical researchers, politicians, they all get these questions wrong.
Interesting.
So all the experts, you would think they would know that the world is getting better, but everyone still has this
the world is getting
picture
worse.
of 1965 worldview. And he shows that the 1965 worldview is developing versus developed. And countries fit nicely in those 2 boxes.
Yes.
The average children that a woman has.
Yes.
So the more.
The average number.
Right.
Yep.
As well as the higher the child mortality rate, the more countries put into developing or developed. On average, the developing country in 1965, the average woman had over 5 children. More than 1 in 10 children would pass away, whereas the developed country was 2 children per birth. Now, if you look at the map today, almost all countries fit in the developed world box if you use this as a parameter of developing versus developed. And there are only 13 countries now in the developing, and that is Afghanistan, South Sudan, Somalia, some of the ones that you would think of when you really think of poverty.
Yes. Isn't that interesting?
Most countries are middle income.
You're seeing people stop using third world country. That phrase is phasing out because I think to the point that you just showed, which is how do you define that? I'm seeing this sort of surgence of a second world country and even putting US in that. If you look at things like education rates, poverty, healthcare, access to healthcare, equity, it's really interesting how this is shifting.
What's also made me think about is we do know that the US is getting behind a little bit, but how much of that, if we were to look at a timeline of just the US and not to look at any comparables of other countries, how well have we been doing? Because if all these other countries have been catching up, is it really that bad that we might be falling slightly behind? Is it bad that other countries are doing better financially and health-wise? And if you want to stop thinking of us versus them, maybe it's a good thing, but I just don't know. There's a lot of statistics out there about how the U.S. is doing. I want to go back to some of those stats I've heard in the past and wonder, is it because other countries are finally doing well? Rosling says it's not a question of intelligence. Everyone seems to get the world devastatingly wrong. And we have this way of over-dramatization of the world. And that's just innate in us to want to think of things in 2 boxes.
Yes.
You're either very poor or very wealthy, or you're, as in terms of our worldview. And he's trying to get people to stop thinking the West versus the rest of the world, or the developing versus the developed, a more nuanced view. And he did say that a chimp would get a better score on this test than most people. That's how bad our view is.
Isn't that terrible?
It is.
ChatGPT would definitely get a better score.
Yeah, no, it definitely would. I've had to fact check ChatGPT recently.
You should. I always tell people use it. It's a tool, and then do QA on it.
I'm not fact checking Hans Rosling on this book.
I bet Hans has it right.
It makes me question, and we're going to go into this in a later episode about effective altruism. Has it been working? Is that part of it? I just thought it was so interesting. I love the data. I love that this author is so insistent on showing the data, and yet people still want to feel a certain way about something.
There's this nationalism that gets in the way too. You were just talking about being competitive and comps. And they're like, of course, we're the US. Like, we've been told that we're the best for forever. Clearly, it's the West versus the rest. I thought that you said that really interestingly. It clouds our judgment, even when facts are black and white and right in front of us.
I love that he says our brains often jump to swift conclusions without much thinking. This used to, many years ago, and I'm reading about this in Sapiens, millions of years of evolution, thousands of years ago, this would help us avoid immediate danger. Nowadays, it just helps us create drama and
biases
us versus them.
That's right.
It's this gap instinct he refers to. This could also be said about politics, unfortunately. If on the right side, if they are on the left side in politics, they are this.
Yes.
They are that. We need to get away from these labels.
Absolutely. It's a really interesting discussion as you work with nonprofits and philanthropies as to where you will be doing this work or should be doing this work. There are assumptions made as to, and we've talked about this before, work abroad, because assuming that they need that help as opposed to looking at our own backyards and saying, wow, we've got a lot of cleanup to do here as well.
It also makes me feel better, and we're going to get into effective altruism a little bit more later, which is more data-driven giving than emotion-driven. Typically, when things are more local, it's more emotionally driven, but it makes you feel better about those emotion-driven, like giving it to the arts and giving it to things that aren't malaria nets. There's this kind of constant battle of where should people show up. We've said in the past with the categories that we care about, I'm so glad that there's people to show up across the board. This may tell me that it's a little bit better in the world, and maybe you can give a little bit back more locally, and that's good.
Yeah, it's a good use of your resources. Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks, Court.
Thanks, Steph.
We'll be right back. Escape into a Cause is sponsored by Nightlight Insurance Agency. You know how a nightlight gives you comfort and peace of mind in the dark? That's exactly what Nightlight aims to do. Guide you through life's uncertainties with personalized insurance for your home, auto, business, and more. Nightlight Insurance strives to provide its clients the best coverage at the best price without sacrificing on customer service. Here's what one client had to say. Nightlight was able to lower our car insurance significantly. answered all our questions, and returned our calls promptly. Very professional, would highly recommend. So it's no surprise Nightlight has a 5-star rating on Google. Nightlight also makes this podcast possible by covering production costs so all other sponsorship dollars and gifts can go directly to nonprofits and volunteers. And as part of their mission to give back, Nightlight proudly donates $1,000 to every nonprofit we interview. If you are a sponsor interested in giving back to our podcast, please find us on social media and let us know. Nightlight is an agency focused on personalized service and giving back. See how much you could save and how good it feels to have peace of mind by visiting nightlightinsurance.com. Today, we are escaping into E3 Alliance, and I have the Director of Post-Secondary and Workforce Readiness, Kyle Sipe. Welcome, Kyle.
Thank you. Happy to be here. You forgot the other duties as assigned. Like the rest of the title is the go ahead and make the coffee, do the other thing. We're a small but mighty organization.
Tell me about all the hats that you wear.
The only thing the E3 doesn't do is drive the bus routes in the morning. When we talk about transforming systems through data and collaboration so that all students succeed, it's easier for us to just dive in and lift with as opposed to telling people how to lift. When we talk about lifting pub ed, whatever it takes.
You have a history of being assistant director, college readiness, career readiness. Tell me, what does E3 Alliance do?
We are a cradle to career place-based partnership. When we think about all of the signposts in a student's education journey, from birth to pre-K to K-12 education, the transition into post-secondary and ultimately workforce attainment, we've got projects, pieces, collaboratives, all the way through direct service to we just want to meet with folks about it. We've got a series of initiatives that are connected to all of those major signposts through the educational journey.
Great. I know that you have a family history of education. Can you speak a little bit about that?
I'm a third generation teacher. I've tried to do everything I could to not be a teacher. I wanted to be Steve Irwin. I wanted to get an accent, chase animals across the globe, study zoology, and you just find that what you do finds you. My dad was a math teacher. My mom was a government and history teacher. My grandfather was a vocational ed teacher. You work on, live on that calendar, and I would just have the summers off type of moment for the rest of my life. So that's also a farce too. And we talk about like summers off for teachers.
Right. I see that all the time, right? But I think teachers are working year round in some capacity.
My gosh, yes. Absolutely. I know we'll dive into the questions too, but just thinking about my own background in teachers, everything I talk about, yes, we'll talk about E3, but when we really talk about like the silver bullet for education, we've always had it. It's just good instruction from a teacher with students, and the students know that person cares about them. Kids don't take courses, they take teachers. When we talk about lifting public education, we talk about fixing public education. We don't need to fix it. The solution's already there. We just need to actually shine the light on it and let it go.
The classes that I remember most, it's the teachers that I remember most. When I think about that, I think about, oh, wow, they taught me all this. But it's because they were engaging. It's because I didn't shut down. It's because I enjoyed and was really excited to soak everything up. I completely agree. Give us a little bit of the history and what is the community that E3 serves?
We've been around since 2006. It was actually an inception of the Austin Area Research Organization. They came together, they found that there was a need, and Susan Dawson, our president emeritus, found a way to get it funded. Basically, that in-between space. How can we set a table for K-12, post-secondary, community-based organizations that everybody can come together in the Central Texas area? We use the Central Texas MSA, that Metropolitan Statistical Area. The Austin Community College Service area is really where we partner up with districts, with our CBOs, Economy Madre, some of the exemplars that are out there. We work across that K-12 continuum.
I'm really glad you guys are here. What is the staff at E3? How many staff?
We've got 33 full-time staff.
Is it focused all on Texas?
We are focused on Central Texas and then a lot of the small and rural schools across Texas.
I just want to paint a picture. You have all of this data in front of us. You have papers of data. And so we are cut from the same cloth because I am very data driven. Can you share with us some of the programs and the impact behind them and just any numbers? I know you've got lots of stats. I love stats.
We're a big research nerd firm. And when you say, what is E3? We grab all of the data and then we ask the questions and we go ask our partners and friends, what else should we see in the data? Or what else should we be looking at? What's the lens? One of the big numbers that keeps popping up is without a post-secondary credential in any way, shape, or form, like a workforce certificate, an associate, or a bachelor degree, in Central Texas, you have a 12% chance of making a livable wage for yourself before you even have a family if you don't have a post-secondary credential. We've got to tip the scale the other way. That's one of the graphics that I've got to share. What does the lifetime earnings in Central Texas look like based on the credential that you have? If a high school diploma is all of it. And these are those stereotypical CTE, CCMR, post-secondary type graphics. It's not to incentivize college. I should say it's to incentivize credential. That's where E3, we want to be a little bit different. It's not just about the 4-year degree. It's about fit and alignment. When we talk about helping students find the passion on that micro level, it's about making sure that on the macro level, the systems and programs are actually set up where the partnerships are there, that if I want to try the jacket on to be a doctor, I can do that beforehand. If I want to try the jacket on to be one of the innovators in the space of semiconductors, don't wait until you're 19, 20 years old. Try it on while you're in these partnerships, while you have access to it, and do so knowing that the outcome of this is a wage on the back end.
There's 2 topics there that are covered at dinner parties or with neighbors. One of them is, do you need higher education nowadays? That's a popular topic. And then the second is, how do these kids even know what they want when they're graduating high school? How are they supposed to choose? We start asking them what they're interested in as early as freshman year, but they're not even getting exposure to any of these career choices. So how are they supposed to know? Funny story. My son turned 16. We were at his birthday party. We had say 7 or 8 other boys. They were all at this table. And my dad, who's in his late 60s, of course, comes by and goes, boys, what do y'all want to do when you're older? They go around the table. And by the time it gets to the third boy, the rest of the table says a professional gambler. That just maybe tells you they're not exactly ready, but sure, you have plenty of ideas of how to get them more career ready.
The better question to ask instead of what you want to do later, let's shift it and say, what's the problem you want to solve? Students, kids, adults, all of us, we want to belong. We want to matter. We want to be seen. We're not seen because of what grade we get. Nobody asks for your GPA pretty much after junior high. In fact, colleges are the only place where there's any transactional currency for it. What problem do you want to solve? How do you see yourself fitting that? How do you want to be seen? Public ed is at this precipice of perception versus perspective, that everybody believes education is the way that I see it through the pinhole into this mural. You miss so much of the detail. We've got to be able to step back and say, how do all of these pinholes actually create the picture of what pub ed is? That's our wheelhouse. It's data. Our president, Richard, says data without action is just decoration. And absolutely, because you've got to be able to look and see, what does my report card say? What does it cause me to do is the better question. One of the impact reports that we wanted to share is in our math work. One of the downstream effects of quality math education. Now, this is a math teacher saying this for sure.
That's right. You have your degree in mathematics.
I do. I sure
Yes.
do. Again, I wanted to be Steve Irwin. I wanted to go like off this.
By
deep
the
end.
way, you have the passion like Steve Irwin. You're in a different sector. Steve Irwin, my favorite clip is the one, I'm sure you've seen it, where his wife is looking at him and he's talking about how I want all the money in the world and I want all the money. I love money and I want to spend it all on conservation. You sound very passionate, so I think that's great.
One of the best multipliers out there as far as betting on yourself is taking a college credit-bearing math course while you're in high school. And you talk about the perfect dress rehearsal for the biggest dinner table question is, do you think I can do this? Mom, hey, I'm thinking about college. What do you think? The answer to that question is the quintessential pivot point for students. Do they feel seen? Do they feel empowered? Is math this thing that I feel like I can consume? Or is it this animal? Because when people say, I can't read, oh my gosh, we throw every resource into it because we see reading as a verb. We still see math as a noun. We don't see math as a thing that's actually this catalyst into what you can do. Part of our math pipeline in Central Texas that we focused on was bringing that table together, bringing higher ed, bringing pub ed, bringing our PTAs, and bringing community and sitting there and saying, hey, we know that students that take a college credit-bearing math course will graduate. Almost 70% of them will enroll in higher ed, which is amazing, by the way, because as a state, we're on a 10-year decline of direct to higher ed enrollment after high school.
Wow.
Almost 2/3 of them will go on to persist to the degree, and then greater than half of that original cohort will actually complete a credential. Now, the beauty of that is that's bachelor's, associates, workforce credentials, but if you really distill it down to your own educational background, it goes into, when did you take Algebra 1? Did you take it as a ninth grader? Because there's still time. One of the principles of teaching and learning is learning takes time. We learn with and through others.
Do you encourage honors, AP classes, any type of dual credit? Is that the kind of classes you're referring to?
This is where we're going to deviate away from not just E3, but just in general. I'm obligated to say the opinions here represent Kyle Sipe. I will say E3 is just a group of passionate people. We all have our specific spikes. This is the one that I definitely lean into. In terms of courses to take, my advice would be to take them all. Take a whole series of CTE courses. Take at least one AP course. Take a dual credit course. Take an on-ramps course if your school offers it. Take an IB course. because it's less about what you get on the back end as terms of credit. It's more about the essential skills, not soft skills that you gain. You understand what it takes. What's the transactional relationship of effort to my output? What does college actually feel like? If I could put that jacket on for what college feels like, frankly, take an on-ramps course. Take a course where you're interacting with a UT professor to know, holy smokes, I'm not just buying into a brand that I see on Saturdays. This is what the experience actually looks like. If you want to actually churn out what the college credit looks like, and this is one of the stats you and I talked about, almost 75% of the bachelor degrees that are offered or conferred every year in Texas have community college credit on them, which translates to the way to complete a degree is by taking more than one institutional credit from more than one institution and then sewing them all together. There's your output, there's your degree. Because we talked about it, because you did that, I did that.
That's right. I do want to speak to that because I feel very passionate about that.
Good.
I have a lot of friends, and some of them are opposed to community college, which is interesting to me. And then I go, did you know I went to community college? Couple things. I took a lot of AP classes, advanced placement classes, when I was in school. I never once took a test. There was a financial barrier. I'm sure I could have applied, didn't figure it out. Sometimes you say, oh, they have the financial means if they were to go and apply and request it to be paid. But sometimes that's a lot of extra hurdles that someone doesn't go through, especially as a student. You don't think to go through. Took a lot of AP courses, didn't take a single AP test. Graduated high school, went straight to community college. My community college was in Berkeley. It was the Peralta Community College.
Okay, yeah.
I had one class on Cal Berkeley campus, and that also gave me confidence being in a Cal Berkeley classroom. Had my first child right after my freshman year of community college, and then had a path to go to University of Texas. Once I was at UT, I got into McCombs. So it's just baby steps the whole way there. Anyway, just speaking to my own personal experience and how being on the Cal Berkeley campus, those little things really boosted my confidence and got me to the point where I'm at a tech company, I'm an accountant, and I would say I'm in the top very high percent of my field in terms of work-life balance, compensation, problem solving, all those things that I actually care about. I'm a success story given all of those, and speaks also to your data and aligns with that as well.
There's no comprehensive research study out there to tell you the secret sauce to should I take AP, dual credit, all of these other iterations of the college credit bearing course, because there's no study out there that measures course quality. It doesn't frankly matter what course it is that makes you feel that way. It's that you get a chance to feel that way. And to make it super, super simple, Dumbo needed a feather to fly. Where do we find the feather? If the health sciences level 4 CTE course is the first time you've like, man, this is my spike. This is peak Kyle. When I'm in this moment, I get everything. The way that I take in information is the stuff. That's the moment. That's the feather. Because that's what's going to carry you into the next one. That's what we need more of. Shameful self-promotion here, dual credits the method. That's the way. Because there's also an audition set for colleges to see. If we parallel the sports world, if you want to be a D1 baseball player, getting directly out of high school into D1 is a challenge scope in the NIL era. The audition space for D1 baseball is junior college. And junior colleges will offer everybody under the sun because what they want to be able to do is put you in a space where you're proving that you can get the reps and do the thing. That's exactly the space of community college. Community college is not just this transitional space. It's that prove it space, but it's also the comfort zone and really the secret sauce to higher ed in Texas. There's a core curriculum. There's a set series of laws that your degree can only be 120 hours. 42 of that is called the Texas Core Curriculum. You can get that through AP, through on-ramps, through dual credit, all those ways, but those are guaranteed transfer lower division courses.
One thing I wanted to bring up, and we just talked about this, is the Texas Tribune just issued the headline, 1 in 5 Texas schools got a D or F rating under new performance standards. Failing grades for districts were made public for the first time since 2019, and they showed schools with the poorest students were more likely to get a low score. Further, Fort Worth ISD had the first school to have a poor rating 5 years in a row, meeting the threshold for a state takeover, the highest level of state intervention. Those are some scary things happening. Some of them say that the new accountability standards by the Texas Education Agency is part of that reason. What is your take with your data and what E3 has done, and maybe even your personal opinion on the matter? How do we improve the rating? Is it the scoring system, or is it the schools are falling behind?
It's unfortunate all the way around. We're not measuring what matters. And if we only measure our job performance based on everybody else's relative growth in their job performance once a year, how would we all measure up? Which my heart goes out to the community, because the school in Fort Worth that you're talking about was a school that I did a lot of work with many years ago. When we go back to what really matters, there's 715 kids at Forest Oak Middle School who show up every day looking for an adult who will believe in them. That's what matters. Not percentage on STAR, not percentage on this criterion reference, any of these other things. There's some really unique opportunities when we talk about accountability. The first question is measuring what matters. Because if we only measure mountains by the largest boulders, then we forget that it's really just a pile of tiny rock. We've got to really look at how we can measure better in the small moments and across, and quit telling everybody that the amount of learning in 175 days has to look the same for all 5.5 million kids. It doesn't. It shouldn't. We need to put the power back into some school leaders' hands who can make some better decisions. They know more about the context in that data. What we see is that the students didn't grow in the 5 years at Forest Oak. What we don't see in an D or an F or in an academic takeover is that moment that a teacher's sitting there having a real conversation about a future with a sixth grader who's looking to get breakfast and lunch because it didn't happen at home. I'm using Forest Oak as an example, but that's students all across the state. When we think about what are we measuring, measure what matters. Measure the tool that matters too. If we use criterions referenced tests, where we're measuring everybody's relative growth compared to everybody else that took that relative growth measure. This is not SAT. This is how the STAR is framed out. When we use criterion reference, we're talking about how much knowledge did you accrue over this amount of time based on what everybody should know on preset criteria. Well, what if you came in at a different spot? What if you came in ahead? We start getting back into norm reference tests like an SAT, like a PSAT, like an NWA MAP test, where if you came in not being able to meet all these criteria, but you had a series of criteria that you already had, how did you grow with the group of folks who were normed, grouped just like you? Are you accelerating your growth to eventually close your own individual gap? Or are you not meeting the standard that you weren't already meeting? We shouldn't be surprised that you didn't meet it in that particular frame, because again, learning takes time.
When I tell my son, he's no longer in sports. He retired after freshman basketball, so he's a retired.
I love that you say retired.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
He tells everyone that. 16 and retired. I run with him. I work out with him. I tell him, you're not going to run track. You're not trying to compete against the fastest people, but start just timing yourself and identify your PR, your personal record. We maybe did that with school, where you stop looking to your left and to your right at all times. I was at UT. I saw the competitiveness. I saw some of those people say, I need to get done in 4 years. I need to be the best. I took longer to graduate. I had to stop looking to the side and just say, where am I going? What's my journey? When you're talking about progress in your own personal progress, especially not holding teachers fully accountable for someone who enters delayed. I don't know if you're speaking to that, but that's how I interpret it as well. When you say we can measure them by other metrics, that's no longer maybe STAR testing or SATs. What does that look like? Does that look like the number of AP courses or dual credit a child is taking? Is it just seeing growth in certain test scores? There's MAP test scores. What is your thought on those metrics?
Example. Tip of the cap to the southwest side of Austin track coaches out there. I went to a track meet with my son, who's a seventh grader this year. It was the first time running. Ran his very first 800 meter, which also I will say, he got a little bit from his dad of the bravado of, oh yeah, I'm going to run the 800, I'm going to run the 400, and I'm going to be on the mile relay, and I'm going to be awesome. Like, as soon as you get over that lack of confidence, I think you've got it made, kid. He runs his first 800, and he runs a 237. He's kicking it a little bit. He's like, oh man, that's not great. His coach is like, dude, you ran a 237. That's amazing.
Just to put that in context, that's
2 laps around the track in 237, and he's down. I didn't run this Olympic qualifying time. I didn't run a 150.
That's half a mile. So you double it, you're at a mile. That's fast.
And I'm stoked because as the dad, I wanted him to humbly find his wheels in the 800, but then he runs it and the coach says, dude, you did it. Now you have a place to work. And it doesn't matter that one of the other kids ran a 210, which was amazing, by the way.
He should be proud of that, but it sounds like the coach really helped him achieve a new perspective.
Absolutely. Because to your point on what we should measure for schools, the track meet was that performance. That's using it as the summative measure. If he held himself to a low level of acceptance for every training session, Those are the training sessions. Those are the formative assessments. Those are the small measures that matter. It's not the volume of courses that you take. It's the amount of effort and attitude that's put into those smaller chunks, those smaller rocks. In fact, when we think of accountability, there's a writer out there called local-based accountability systems, the LBAS in the education world. When we look at what districts measure, of course, they still want to measure some of the SATs, some of the stars, things like that, but they also want to measure, did I have growth on my 5th grade NWA MAP test from beginning of the year to middle of the year? If I use just that 3-month sequence, where am I at as an individual? One of the things that schools are fantastic at is intervention ahead of time, not remediation after the fact. When we think of proaction, if I can anticipate that I'm going to struggle with, and I'm going to use math examples because that's definitely the lane that I want to live in. If I'm going to struggle with numeracy, then I shouldn't find that out on a summative test on one of the big rocks. The art of teaching is that a teacher sees something and addresses a misconception in those smaller bits, but we don't get credit for the small bits. That's teaching. We only get credit for if it shows up on one day. The time and the work was not one day. We can't measure our schools by 120 minutes of 75,600 a year.
Funding comes into play, right? Funding linked to attendance. I always question that. Everyone's saying every time your student's out, there's less funding. Do you have any thoughts?
I have tons of thoughts here because one of the misconceptions out there is that attendance is the only way that schools get money. Remember that roughly 75% of your school's budget comes from property taxes. Yes, I'm going to leave here and go protest my property tax value to make sure that it's still adequate and things like that. But it's not just your house. It's the aggregate of all of our houses, all of our business, and all of our community together. And that's what makes up the lion's share of school funding. About 24% of the remainder comes from the state allotments where attendance factors in and outcomes bonus and things like that. And the remainder comes from federal grants and federal dollars that's poured through National School Lunch Program. And sometimes that pie chart swells based on the community. When we talk about funding schools adequately for who's there, is attendance the thing? Is enrollment the thing? Or is outcomes the thing? Frankly, it's probably a combination for all of the above. Schools are held accountable for the students that show up on their building and are there present for the October snapshot. When I get my accountability, I get my A through F. As a school, my A through F for that particular year is based on the student star performance when they were there in October. Now, if that student moves and we have a 14% mobility rate in Texas, I'm still held accountable because that student was there in October. Now, there's some mitigating policy and things that's in there, but we're not talking about attendance for the student that's no longer there, even though we're talking about his or her output on the star is what shows up. There's some misgivings that when we add too much into the funding formulas, there's allotments, there's all kinds of other things that really close the gap here. Is attendance the right way to fund districts? Is outcomes the right way to fund districts? The right way to fund districts is to incentivize industry to a point where we no longer look at public education as a social reason, social capital to be involved. We look at public education as the actual tangible ROI for my workforce, for my future, who's going to be on a retirement system that's publicly funded, for the way that we generate Texas, which is the 8th largest economy in the world, built on our workforce. Our workforce is sitting in the 5.5 million seats that we call public education. That's not social reasoning to be involved. That is our future. Texas, we've got to start looking at public education as investing in ourselves.
This is the advertisement for you and your
Oh my
E3
gosh.
Alliance right there. Invest in nonprofits like E3 Alliance. I truly believe that. I agree with everything you said. I want to connect listeners to stories. And you have 1 or 2 stories you can share, Kyle?
Absolutely. In getting our Central Texas math group together, one of the things that we noticed is that there was a very clear gap in the students who were already high achieving in 5th grade star. They were already high achieving, but there was a major gap in the percentage of those students who actually ended up taking Algebra 1 when they were in 8th grade. Translation to what it feels like as a family from that 5th to 6th grade point. 6th grade is where students get to finally take their first advanced course, if you will. And in the advanced math sequence, that's where we take the 6th grade curriculum and the 7th grade curriculum, we mush them together, and they do all of that during 6th grade. Then they take the 8th grade curriculum during their 7th grade year so that they can take Algebra 1, a high school credit, as an 8th grader. What we see in this data is that the percentage of Black students, percentage of Hispanic students who were already high performing, they weren't all getting in the seats even though they had the same level of output as some of their peers, which just means either they didn't get the message, being come to the advanced academic night where we tell you about this, read this particular flyer, look at this thing, or whatever the case. The methodology was there had to be some reason for you to opt in. Our Central Texas districts, looking at this data when we worked with them, said, we can do better than that. The first thing they started doing is preloading everybody that was in the first or second quintile in that fifth grade star. You're automatically enrolled. Hayes, Leander, Austin, Elgin, Del Valle, Manor, tip of the cap. You're already automatically enrolled in sixth grade math because you've already shown that you have the performance level to do it. We believe in you. Let's go forward. Growth mindset.
They removed the opt-in.
Which switched it to an opt-out. The only way you're getting out of this is if you tell us, mom and dad, that you don't want them to be in there. You don't want them to be in the world's greatest content area, mathematics, in this class that's going to sequence them up to being part of this cohort that we talked about, completing that credential where they take and have access to a higher volume of college credit bearing courses. Opting out of that is absolutely parents like, no, that's where we want them. In part of this work with Central Texas, and this is our districts banding together, doing the small test to change. You can see in our most updated data here, it's still there. It's upholding. It's still in the same cohorts. The saturation level is still equal. Our former president, Susan, likes to really quip it. When we talk about closing this gap, we closed it by 90%.
Huge difference by making it an opt-out versus opt-in. I do have a funny story real quickly. My son Connor, fourth grade, sex education starts. And I don't know why they changed it to an opt-in program. Here I am, I'm CPA, I'm busy season, I'm missing every single email. Some of the moms finally were at dinner and they were like, oh, which parents are opting not putting their kids in sex ed because it maybe tells them a little bit about the parent. One of the kids said, oh, Connor Dyer, he was left in the classroom by himself while we all went to go.
Excellent.
Oh no. And then all the parents, all the moms knew immediately that I just missed the email because they knew I wouldn't be one that was like, no, he doesn't need that. To your point, he missed that education course, that half day, because I didn't see the opt-in email.
And think about that. It's not an invitation. It's a welcome. It's not a, I think you can. It's a, you've already shown. But when we talk about Central Texas kind of setting, the opt-out strategy has been deployed in pockets all across the state. What Central Texas and the E3 districts did good is take this, grab it, and hand it to our policy team. We got some backing from some of our local House of Representatives, and last year Senate Bill 2124 kicked out, which made that process the way that 5th to 6th grade math happens now in Texas. And there's states all across the United States say, holy smokes, how did that happen? How did this work? What are the outcomes of this? One of the coolest outcomes is 52,999 more kids from low-income households that were Black and Hispanic are participating in a course they were already qualified to be in because of the way that they performed. They're on that sequence to be in this cohort, to do the thing and see themselves wearing that jacket of success because they were already there and somebody finally said, whoa, we got you.
Love it.
That's absolutely amazing.
Do you have another story for me?
We run a CCMR coalition where we bring our CTE directors, CCMR directors, even some counseling directors together. We turn into old man or old lady yells at sky type of moment, but it's like, what's the way? To your question, my parents are asking me, which one should I take? AP, dual credit, on-ramp, CTE. When we think about Central Texas as a whole, we say, what is the one? So it actually turned into our Pathways to Prosperity study. And that's where the predictors that you see here as a series of districts. If I know that participating in dual credit makes me 3 times more likely than my peers to enter, complete, and be a post-secondary credential, what would I do with that? The coalition came together and said, hey, Austin Community College, hey, Texas State Technical College, we would love to offer more of this. And we think about the secret sauce. It's making sure that we don't leave pub ed to lift the whole world by itself. Partnerships are what drive this. These pathways to prosperity predictors that taking at least one dual credit course, taking an AP course, participating in CTE, earning an industry-based certification while in high school, are all of these massive multipliers that turn into long-term post-secondary success. This is, by the way, this is not an E3 story. This is setting the stage for one of our biggest and longest tenured partners, Austin Community College, who sees this world that we talked about. They see the funding, they see the accountability, they see the policy, they do all these things, and they ask themselves a question, I wonder what would happen if. Their new chancellor, Dr. Russell Lowry Hart, came in and within the first 3 months said, hey, we need to offer free community college to Central Texas graduates. Not can we do it? How will we do it? And that turned into not just last year's spring graduates, but all 4 prior cohorts, including this year's 2025 graduates, and hopefully becomes the way moving forward. You guys can enter ACC campuses at no charge to you. Where you would have had to use financial aid dollars to cover your cost and still have to work on the side, use your financial aid dollars for your cost of living, your cost of attending. We got you on the textbooks, on the tuition, because what we know is that you participating in a college credit bearing course is the catalyst to success. Our districts then turn around and say, we want a bigger bite. We want to offer more CTE dual credit. Let the one message be dual credit courses in workforce ed. If you're able to take a college credit bearing course in welding, in an allied health pathway, in robotics and automation, you are not on your way to success. You are the success. You are already primed to enter the job market in Central Texas at a higher, faster, and more meaningful rate than all of your peers who are headed to those 4-year institutions. You're ready to roll. You're going to get in with a company who's going to push you into a space where they'll actually pay for the completion of your bachelor's degree. All of these things that are there. It needs to get out that this is the way, not the who you know. As E3 is, we know all of these things. We have all these variables. We have these predictors. Our districts love these things. How do we amplify them? How do we get together in that CCMR coalition and say, what's the best fit? What's the next step? How do we actually pull this off?
Yeah, I love that. That's incredible. Okay, I'm having such a hard time moving off of this, but I do make every guest say a good brag. And this is something that you've done good recently, and it's to inspire others. Kyle, do you have a good brag you can share?
My mom was a 40-year teacher. She passed away a couple years ago. It still gets me a little bit. We donated a bunch of books because she loves to read.
What did she teach?
She did teach government and U.S. history and then reading for a long time. But she was one of those teachers whose rooms always were decorated over the top. The first day of class, you walked into her room, you would either have that moment of, oh my God, what have I gotten into? Or this is going to be amazing, or at least it smells nice in here. She was just quirky, had the different shoes, weird socks, like all kinds of stuff. She wanted to be the center of the universe for the 186 kids that she had every year. When she passed away, the E3 team put together a whole series of books and then went to one of our schools who would be on this DNF list and put a bookshelf together and said a free come and take library for you guys as a K2. Take them home, read. And when we talked about what's something in our organization, what can people do to help? Grab a book and go read a book to a kiddo. Tell them they matter. That's what matters.
She sounds like she was a very special person. Reminds me when you started describing her, like the magic school bus.
She would love that.
Was it Mrs. Fizzle or I'm going to say the name wrong.
I will too.
It seems like maybe some of your passion came from her.
Absolutely.
Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate it. What are ways that listeners can show up for E3?
One, changing the way we talk about public school in your coffee conversations that you have with friends. Not only will that help your local campus, your local region, it helps us too. We can't be the only ones holding the megaphone saying schools can, schools will, schools do. In order to help us hold that megaphone, sometimes that's showing up to a community event, get involved. If you're a business owner, don't look for ways to get your jetty abatement and not invest in public schools. Look for a way to turn your investment into an ROI. Let us help you with that, and not to be shameful self-promotion and fund us to do it. We're not here to be the ones in front of the spotlight. That's not our jam. Our jam is to be able to show that there's 5.5 million success stories. Sometimes that's the philanthropic dollars. If you're looking for ways, we pursue a lot of philanthropy, finding ways for our private foundations to invest, even so much as you think about just the $1,500 mark enables one of our researchers to deep dive a campus and absolutely decompose it down to where we're looking at maps, charts, and graphs of this individual campus. The tangible ROI there is, if we know more, we can do better. Carol Commodore says, what we know today doesn't make yesterday wrong, it makes our tomorrow better. That's the way that we've got to see our role in this nonprofit space.
One thing that we've talked about in Topics That Matter in the past is effective altruism. It's very data-driven, and a lot of it is to donate abroad a lot because it's about reducing suffering. But what I love about effective altruism is it's very data-driven, and if there was a local nonprofit that is extremely data-driven and making sure that results are data-driven, it's E3 Alliance. There is nothing better than securing the youth's future, and they are our future. I say show up, donate money, money. Any other ways to volunteer and like closer to E3 Alliance? Or is it really just showing up for your schools and donating when you can?
If you're out there and you want to volunteer or you want to donate and you're not sure where to start, we would love to help you, because what we can also point you to is who needs it the most. One of the things that we would specialize in is shining the light where the light doesn't always show. In thinking that way, an easy example is we have a lot of pass-through dollars. When some of our dollars that we get, we actually call them emergency bridge grants. That if you're a college student and you get a flat tire, for you and I, like we've been professionals, some of us longer tenured professionals and a little more grizzled, for a flat tire as a small and rural kid, okay, I got it, check. If I'm working check to check on an earn and learn opportunity, that $200 may be it. That may be my textbooks, that may be my fees. Our emergency bridge grants are a $500 grant. Hey, you need to make rent this month, apply to it. And that's through the Hispanic Scholarship Consortium. We snag that money, we don't do anything with it. There's nothing that goes back into our general fund, our operating cost. That's when we talk about cost to credential. The cost to attend is what we don't always think about. We think it's just attendance, it's just tuition, it's just books. No, it's having to put your life on hold to do all of these things. And sometimes folks need a little extra hand. They need somebody to say, I got you.
Kyle, this has been so great. I love the data and I love education and I love the youth, and what you guys are doing at E3 Alliance is great. Thank you for the chat today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Hey listeners, there are a few things that got me thinking. Kyle said kids don't take courses, they take teachers. That is so true. Just recently, my son Connor, he's in 6th grade orchestra, he's learning the viola. He doesn't exactly love playing it. He doesn't practice at home. He definitively declined my suggestion of orchestra camp this summer. But when I asked if he wanted to stick with orchestra next year, he said yes, without hesitation. Why? 2 words. Mrs. Compton, his teacher. She's interesting, she's funny, and she makes him feel seen. And we all remember a teacher like that. The Mrs. Comptons, the Mrs. Frizzles. Yes, it's Frizzle from the Magic School Bus. I checked, not Fizzle. And Kyle's mom. They change the way we experience learning. They give us energy. They're the reason kids show up. Who are those teachers that stuck with you? Who made school more than just a checklist of subjects? Who made you feel like you could do more or dream bigger? We all have had at least one. We've probably had many. And that's what I loved talking about with Kyle. It's about what it takes for students to not just graduate, but launch. Kyle and the team at E3 Alliance are working across Central Texas to connect students, schools, and employers with systems and data that actually move the needle. Kyle's stat stayed with me. Only 12% of Central Texans without a post-secondary credential earn a livable wage. Think about that. And Kyle and E3 Alliance are pushing us to think bigger. It's not just about college, it's about finding the right credential. A degree, a certification, an apprenticeship. As they put it so brilliantly, students need more chances to try on careers before they pick a lane. And E3 is making that happen. They helped lead the way on Senate Bill 2124, creating an opt-out policy that automatically enrolls top-performing 5th graders into Algebra 1 by 8th grade. If that had been placed in earlier, over 50,000 more students would have had access to advanced math. That's what system-level change looks like. Set these children up for success. In our Topics That Matter segment, Courtney and I explored how the world is doing better. The data doesn't lie. And it got us thinking, when people say the U.S. isn't as great as it used to be, especially in education, could it be that we aren't doing that much worse, but other countries are catching up? I did a fact check, and this is one piece of the story. Other countries, places like Estonia, Japan, Singapore, have gotten much better. They've invested in teaching, early education, and smart reforms that push them ahead in global rankings. And this is true across the board. As Hans Rosling said, countries are doing better across the world, and that's a good thing. So I think Hans Rosling is right. It's time to stop thinking about the West versus the rest. Okay, so Kyle's message is clear. Every student should feel like they belong in rooms they didn't know they could be in. That is exactly what happened to me. Starting at community college, taking classes at a big campus, at UC Cal Berkeley, eventually landing at UT and discovering I didn't just belong there, I could thrive there. And it all started with having opportunities and showing up for those opportunities I wasn't sure I was ready for. Okay, so E3 Alliance is doing a lot of good work. Do you want to earn some bragging rights? They're doing big things and they need partners. So invest, sponsor a project, or join the E3 Legacy Trust. Also, like Kyle said, use your voice. attend community events, talk about public education, advocate for systems that work. And if you want to do some good and win hockey tickets, post how you're showing up for nonprofits like E3 Alliance and do #goodbrag and DM us, or go to escapeintoacause.com or social media. You'll find a link to sign up for volunteer information. You have a chance to win Texas Stars hockey tickets because the Texas Stars loves giving to those that give back. Lastly, Kyle shared this gem from Carol Commodore. What we know today doesn't make yesterday wrong. It makes our tomorrow better. And I think both from the Topics That Matter segment with Court and my interview with Kyle, data is knowledge, and let's make tomorrow better. This wonderfully put. Thanks again, Kyle and the E3 Alliance team. Thank you to Nightlight Insurance Agency for sponsoring this episode and your donation to E3 Alliance. Huge thanks to Todd Thompson for editing and mixing, Ashlyn O'Neill for content management, Graham Thompson and Jane Dyer for the music, and Corey McCain at Just Push Record Studios. Next week, we escape into I Live Here, I Give Here. If you've wondered how to make giving more effective, visible, and inclusive, do not miss it. I hope you join me next week as we escape into a cause.